and is necessary to address global challenges, to develop and mentor global citizens, to ensure that our institutions in India are competitive and relevant, and to attract and retain talent. So all of us are concerned with addressing the challenges of the future, and internationalization will ensure that we make our students ready as global citizens. What are the dimensions of internationalization? Um, to ensure effective internationalization, one thing that is extremely important is to ensure that we have an ecosystem that promotes internationalization. For this, one requires governance, management, and policy, starting at the national level and carrying on to the institutional level, going right through to individuals who wish to engage in internationalization. So to start with, we need to have an enabling legislative environment, and we are seeing some very interesting changes in India, with the national education policy being the first education policy in India that very specifically addresses internationalizations, what are the opportunities, and what is the necessity to go about this. I will show a little bit later in the presentation, UGC has published in July 21 a handbook on internationalization, which is quite specific and an excellent guide for this. So the other aspect is institutional imperative and flexibility. So besides having a legislative environment that is enabling at the national level, each institution needs to ensure that they are enhance internationalization. What does this mean? As we will see later, there are so many aspects to internationalization. So to start with, an institution and its leadership needs to engage with this opportunity, needs to understand it, and offer flexibility to start with before starting to create rules and guidelines and frameworks around internationalization. A strategic approach needs to be taken to internationalization. So one of the key phrases in internationalization, or the debates within institutions, are, should this be top-down or bottom-up? And the correct answer is both. So the institution needs to encourage and enhance internationalization, needs to facilitate internationalization, needs to provide the resources, needs to provide skilled manpower to support this. But who can actually deliver internationalization, who can engage with it, are the people on the ground. Staff members, whether they're faculty or professional services staff, and of course, students. What is also needed to facilitate internationalization is the structures. So an Office of International Relations, or an international office, or a global office, which is quite defined in what it does and is connected throughout the institution, that is staffed with the people, with the right people, professional services staff who know how to do this. In many institutions, we see faculty members taking this on, and that becomes unsustainable for the institution and for those faculty. So the other aspect of internationalization that may be not terribly apparent is internationalization at home. This has become quite a significant tagline. So IAH is how it's commonly known. So internationalization at home for an institution, what does this mean? This must ensure that all across the teaching programs, there are global perspectives that are embedded. So this can be interpreted in many ways. If we are learning about agriculture, for example, agriculture tends to be taught very much in the local context. But today, no problem or no challenge is local. They're all global, they're all interconnected. And therefore, it's quite important for any program to have global perspectives, and not as a specialized module that is optional, but is quite integrated across. Also, learning outcomes need to be directed towards a global perspective. What does this mean? So, for example, a student needs to be able to debate or present that this problem or this challenge looks this way in India, but looks another way in Europe or Australia, for example. Another form of internationalization at home is to have a country or a region center in one's institution. So, for example, China is very successful in having its government-sponsored Confucius Institutes placed within various universities across the world. These teach not only language, but also how to do business in that country and have a lot of cultural events. There are examples of other centers as well like this at centers across the world, including India centers. Another form is informal internationalization at home. So some of the most fun parts of internationalization, ensuring that you have cultural events on campus that students can go to, that faculty can engage with, opening one's eyes to different ways of life and different perspectives, to different languages, food, etc. Ensuring that international students anywhere have a buddy from a different culture, from a different context, so that they can both learn from each other, and that isn't a one-way situation. Cultural diversity in the classroom is something that many international universities focus on quite a lot, to ensure that the learning from peers in the classroom and across the student community benefits from this diversity in the classroom. Internationalization involving all staff and students is very important. So not only some. So internationalization should not be restricted to those who work in an international center or who are doing an international relations degree. This is something that all need to engage with. Another dimension of internationalization is strategic partnerships. We see a lot of these in some of the leading global universities, where a university decides to commit to another key university and puts in, for example, a strategic pot of funding, which will enhance small research collaborations, small exchanges, or mobility between these two. This could also be seen, for example, in a cluster such as Una Europa. So the University of Edinburgh is involved in a cluster of 7 leading research universities in Europe. And what this partnership means or will deliver is, for example, a PhD program that can be done across 2 or 3 of these 7 universities in a very seamless manner. This will also extend to the degree programs, joint undergraduate or masters, and will also ensure sort of seamless credit transfers, research funding, and this takes a lot of work at the governance level. So this has to go top down, but has to be implemented and delivered bottom up. This kind of partnership is certainly the way of the future for many leading research-led universities, where research is the imperative driving these kind of partnerships. In terms of degree programs, these kind of strategic partnerships have been seen for quite a while and also fairly active in India. The joint PhD programs are quite successful between Indian universities and some Australian universities. For example, IIT Bombay, Monash, has an excellent structure, which is an independent legal structure giving one PhD degree with 2 logos to the students. And this has found great traction with industry. So this is certainly a step up from a joint PhD supervision, which is something that we see quite often and is relatively easy. However, the joint PhD degree required a huge amount of governance engagement right at the Senate and downwards. We are seeing the fanning out of this kind of partnership into, for example, IIT Delhi and the University of Queensland, and perhaps much broader as we go on. Another form of partnership or strategic partnership is dual degrees. So the master's or undergraduate degrees, which we see in many other parts of the world, which again have regulations that prevent one degree with 2 logos, for example, in China. So students who attend these kind of programs will actually get 2 degree certificates for the same program. Another aspect is twinning, where students may do a 2+2 for a 4-year undergraduate program, 2 at their home university in their home country and 2 at a foreign university, getting 1 or 2 degrees for the same. And then, of course, the other is joint PhD. What these strategic partnerships require from institutions is a clear defined idea of why they need to engage in this and what it takes to commit to this. Over here, we are involving students and their degrees. So the preparation and the management requires a great deal of resource and thinking, as well as the governance structures around degrees. So mapping of curricula, ensuring that the governance of awarding degrees is a matching situation. To deliver these kind of partnerships, there is a great deal of support from some of the international agencies, which actually promote the courses where academic administrative staff can learn how to deliver these. So for example, the EU offices deliver workshops on how to deliver articulation and joint degrees. So if I may, since I have more of a UK-India background, internationalization of research, is a particular area I'd like to talk a little bit about more. Since 2008, the UK and Indian governments and third parties have together invested £300 million in co-funded research and innovation programs. This was done by UK Research and Innovation, which is a body that encompasses the 7 or 8 research councils in the UK that fund research over there. And they have 3 international offices, one in India, one in China, and one in the US. The India office became active in 2008 in Delhi and brought in £150 million. The rest of the funds were brought in by the Indian government and other parties. This resulted in 258 projects funded in 1665 publications. And the interesting part is that these publications had an average field weightage of 2.2, more than twice the global average of the UK and Indian averages separately. So this really demonstrates why internationalization in research is an incredibly good thing to do. This also brought in several industry partners. And the other aspect of this is that nearly 27% of the publications in this joint field were in energy versus 3.7% of global publications which focus on energy, which also tells you that when you're delivering an international research program, the focus really is pulled towards some of the key challenges that we all face together. If I may quickly show a brief and excellent film.
For the last decade, we have been enhancing the UK-India relationship in research and innovation. Today, this partnership covers the full spectrum of research and innovation, from arts to astronomy, including nearly 200 individual projects. 90% of researchers evaluated the overall impact of the India-UK funding to be high or very high. The majority of the respondents agreed that the UK-India partnership has had a global level impact, with local communities being the key beneficiaries. This partnership is transforming lives. It's creating new shared economic opportunities, boosting prosperity. It's helping to expand human knowledge across a range of areas of research, and it's helping address global challenges. So, for example, one project is focused on solving the problem of industrial waste using biotechnological solutions. Another has looked at managing the reality of rapid urban growth. While the focus of this is on India, the findings will be relevant to cities across the globe. Since 2008, when the office was established, the UK, together with the Government of India and third parties, have together invested over 300 million in a portfolio of high-impact collaborative projects. This has supported over 200 research projects and over 100 industry partners. All of this work is showing the relationship between UK and India to be beneficial for the two countries. But more than that, it's having an impact for all countries, making the two nations a joint force for global good.
Yeah. Sorry. This is not allowing me to move to the next slide. I hope you enjoyed that film. To carry on to the other dimensions of internationalization, we talked a little bit about internationalization of the curriculum, but this in itself is a massive subject and of concern to many institutions across the world at the moment. Again, this needs to focus across subject areas and have inclusivity in learning approaches and outcomes, including addressing learning for those who are different from the norm in the classroom and outside, and providing support for those for whom this is important. There is a huge debate, particularly in the West, in the UK and Europe, around decolonizing the curriculum. There is it is accepted that much of our teaching and textbooks are dominated by a Western perspective. There is a much greater awareness of this and how to address the change, because decolonizing the curriculum is not a very simple subject. Understanding the depth of this colonization of the curriculum itself is a massive area of academic study now, and how to change this and ensure that perspectives and conversations are much more inclusive and much more neutral and unbiased, I think is key for institutions anywhere. Language is a huge part of internationalization. A lot of cultural perspectives, come across through language. Many of our higher education institutions across the world focus on English because that is seen to be as a way to ensure that people communicate across cultures, across borders. However, there is increasing engagement with language studies, not only to study them as a language, but as a vehicle for higher education. Online learning. The pandemic has completely changed how we look at online learning. Online learning was earlier seen as a stepchild to in-classroom learning, but I don't think we will ever go back to that situation post-pandemic. So online learning is, of course, about online distance learning and technology in the classroom. So ensuring, technology is able to facilitate the different kinds of digital learning, future learning, bring in perspectives and people to the classroom that would otherwise not be possible in a traditional classroom, is something that is not only a great area of implementation, but also academic study in many parts of the world. One of the most obvious ways of internationalization is mobility. Student mobility and staff mobility, and bi-direction mobility is one of the most powerful forms of internationalization. So not only having students go from a developing country to a developed one, but certainly both ways. This has demonstrated sort of intense learning and can be seen in many forms. So for example, short exchanges for a week or two during a summer or a winter break, a semester abroad, a year abroad, twinning, and experiential learning. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. Staff mobility is hugely important, not only for faculty, is important also for the professional services staff. How our universities and institutions are run depend entirely on professional staff, and exposing them to international perspectives into how facilitation is done across universities elsewhere is a very key part of internationalization and the enhancement of this at various universities. Virtual mobility, again, is something that the pandemic has forced us to look into. So whether it's about a pandemic, climate disasters, or anything else, I don't think the future will be free of virtual mobility. But in virtual mobility, we mustn't forget the soft aspects of real mobility. So the ability to have conversations, casual conversations, meetups, and the opportunity for people to get to know each other and then work together is very important to ensure. Another huge advantage of virtual mobility is to broaden access. So obviously mobility is expensive, and only some can afford this, or some institutions can facilitate a certain number of mobility opportunities. But also virtual mobility allows access to those who, for reasons of disability, may not be able to travel. One example I'd like to give of student mobility and experiential learning is something that I was involved myself in putting together a while ago, called the Sustainable Fashion Trek. The professor who you see in shorts at one corner of the picture on top, said, I want my students, my business and other students, business school students, to understand the context of cotton, fashion, and sustainability from the Indian perspective. And what came out at the other end was an 8-day program where students were taken directly into the wonderful parts of Gujarat that are so home to fantastic crafts related to textiles and fashion, ajrak, bandhni, and others, and dyeing, indigo, etc. These students were taken straight from Edinburgh, from their universities, into rural Gujarat. They were taken to the homes of the craftspeople who demonstrated how they deliver their crafts, which immediately showed up that you can't take these crafts into a workshop or into a factory. Neither can you, massify it. It wouldn't be the same. And the understanding of the culture, the way of life, and the craft really started coming together for them. Moving on from there to various organizations who work on the ground to work with our local Indian cotton breeds, and to work with the craftspeople to ensure that their crafts are sustained and accessible and relevant to modern India. These are some of the things they saw. Coming back to, of course, there is a picture of the group at uh, the house of, so I think that is a Gandhi ashram. And then this is at the bottom, the ladies on sewing machines, is a facility set up by Anita Dongre to work in rural Maharashtra, ensuring that they have livelihood, but also, sustainability of this industry. So this was a very powerful learning experience, which not only ensured exposure to the dimensions of fashion. So none of these students are ever going to walk into a shop and buy something for £2 and chuck it away, a couple of weeks later. They are much more mindful about their consumption and the impacts of all of this. And also there were a very interesting conversation between students of business, art, fashion, design, history, who all came together for this experience. There's a brief film, which I will show. Moving on from that, another aspect of a key aspect of internationalization is transnational education. Um, Transnational education is seen as the sort of much larger, more visible forms of internationalization. There are two particular forms which are popular. One is called the International Branch Campus, and the other is the International Joint University. This is actually a very interesting and evolving area because we continuously see new forms and models. And with the Gujarat Biotechnology University of Edinburgh partnership, I think we are seeing the development of a new model again. International branch campuses are not yet seen in India. This is something that is being discussed. Again, there's a paper that has been published very recently on understanding the interest of top international universities in establishing an IBC in India, and what are the challenges in that context. So some of the models we see in other parts of the world are a wholly owned international branch campus by the parent university, a local government partner, or a private investor working with the incoming university. Renting, for example, in the Middle East, we have many examples where there is an international education city set up by the government and private investors, and international branch campuses rent that space and then deliver. Or an existing academic partnership between two universities from two different places. An international joint university is seen in parts of East and Southeast Asia, where existing universities partner with an existing foreign universities to create a new institution as a fresh legal entity and to deliver a joint degree in a different location. The Gujarat Biotechnology University of Edinburgh model is also fits under the TNE umbrella, but is quite different. And I'm sure many people will have views on what it's actually going to be called. But we certainly hope that this model might see itself replicated successfully in other parts of India and elsewhere. So I mentioned that we are seeing a lot of activity and awareness in India. So starting with the national education policy in 2020, in the middle you see a note on establishing international branch campuses in India. This is a very useful document. The National Institute of Education Planning and Administration has an excellent colleague whose name is here in the publication, Eldo Matthews, who has done a great deal of work in this area. His articles are very useful for anyone that is interested in knowing more about this area. And this document tells us a lot about what needs to develop in India to ensure that we might see some of these IBCs. UGC has also just launched this a few months ago, the International of Higher Education Guidelines. Again, a very useful document. So what are the opportunities? For faculty, there are a number. I'm talking, of course, mostly about the sciences. DST, Department of Science and Technology, Department of Biotech, have a number of agreements with their counterpart agencies overseas, and these are easily available. These are continuously updated. There are also country websites focused on India. So, for example, I showed the UK Research and Innovation website. There is a Newton Bhabha Fund, UK India Education and Research Initiative from the UK, and many more, and I'll show a few of those. There is the EU-India Strategic Partnership, which has gone through many iterations and is in a different form as well. Sweden Indo-US Science and Technology Fund. I haven't listed everything because there is certainly a multitude. And what is interesting, there is a growing focus of engaging with India through these research sort of agreements. This is certainly due to the attraction of working with India, because you can't solve a global challenge without India. And also our science and technology base is certainly strong and enhanced by international partnerships. There are a large number of opportunities for students. There's a large number of scholarships. So there are aggregator scholarship websites which show up different kind of scholarships. And there again are country initiatives for scholarships as well as for mobility programs. Because, of course, I'm connected with the UK, you'll see more of that here. So UK Research and Innovation shows a lot of funding programs and has a lot of guidance. Also usefully gives a lot of projects funded and case studies of what has worked. UKRI provides funding of a smaller scale to ensure startup of smaller sort of partnerships. And I give an example, of course, of an Edinburgh partnership with BHU. And this was a very useful project, recycling waste from PCBs to recover valuable metals. The British Council, again, is a very useful website. So they have a number of India-UK connections in higher education, including the Newton Bhabha Fund. There is also UKRI, which is administered by British Council, Going Global Partnerships Grant, which is actually very active at the moment and has some initiatives with Gujarat Live. Internationalizing Higher Education talks about the policy and ecosystem to facilitate this. Chevening is a really big opportunity, both for scholarships and fellowships. So scholarships, of course, for students at the master's level, and fellowships for staff, on various aspects of leadership and internationalization. I again list some of the major areas. US has the Educational Foundation with Nehru Fulbright Fellowships and others under that scheme. There's the Indo-US Science and Technology Forum. Of course, the EU-India Research and Innovation Program, and the Australia government's program. But there are, as you may know, many others also. That brings me to the end of my talk. Thank you very much. My contact details are up here, and I'd be very happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Thank you for the interesting session. On behalf of our team, I thank you, Ms. Amrita, for gracing our seminar with such a knowledge. We hope the session will inspire our people out there. Now, I will request participants to ask their questions.
Okay. May I ask? Hello.
Yes, please.
Good morning, madam.
Good morning.
So, what you have observed, what type of hurdles here you have observed for this internationalization of our things?
Um, that is a very broad question, but I will try to be very brief.
Briefly, yes, madam.
So one major hurdle at the institutional level is the understanding of internationalization. What is it that the university understands as internationalization, and what would they like to do? As you can see, the palette of internationalization is huge and very broad. And every institution cannot do everything and should not attempt to do everything. So, what is a priority? Why do they want to do it? Are they able to assign the resources to it, both in terms of people and finances, and plan for it? For example, if you want to send your students overseas or receive students from overseas, there's a great deal of support that needs to be put there. So, of course, starting with the funding, but how do you manage people's travel, visas, someone falls ill, language, culture? These things must be thought about, and due planning must be given into these areas. But of course, that extends to all the other areas of internationalization. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, madam. Thank you. So, you are taking some initiative in addition to this awareness, this talk. GBU has taken an initiative for this thing.
So GBU is starting up as an institution, and at the in terms of its establishment, has an international partnership. But the delivery of these different aspects of internationalization will develop as the university is goes live with its students, etc. So yes, we have in mind the dimensions of internationalization. What we will address, and what will come in what order is something that will remain to be seen when its staff and students come in. I see a few other hands up,
Yes,
Dr. Dalai and
Yeah.
Kajal.
Good morning. You
Good morning.
mentioned actually teaching varieties of languages. I understand why that is required. But what is your plan to teach? Which are the languages you like to teach the students who will enroll in GBU, UG or PhD programs?
So GBU is focused on biotechnology as a specialization, and therefore it's a very thematic, specialized university. So GBU itself will not be teaching languages. My talk was addressing the broad aspects of internationalization, not really focusing on what GBU will do at this time. It is too early to say that, but languages are a great, very important part of internationalization. That was the point I was making. Hello.
Any other questions?
I think Kajal has had her. Dr. Dalai, I hope I've answered your question.
Yeah, actually, there is some internet, disruption on my side. If you could repeat.
Yes, I was saying that GBU is focused on biotechnology. So GBU does not have plans to teach a language or teach in a different language at the moment. It will focus on setting up and starting its postgraduate programs.
Okay. Thank
Thank
you.
you. I think Kajal has had her hand up. Are there any other questions?
Yeah, I have another question with respect to.
Certainly. Hello.
I think, sir, internet is not good
Yeah.
connectivity.
Meanwhile, that Dr. Sharad Dalai comes back, Amrita, can I ask you a question?
Of course.
Okay. What are the kind of things that University of
Yeah.
Edinburgh would look forward to collaborate with any institution?
University of Edinburgh would look to understand what is the interest of the institution in partnering and what kind of program it is looking at. So, for example, if it is looking at a joint research collaboration, what is the area of research and does it bring benefit to both Edinburgh and the partner? So, for example, will Edinburgh gain from it? Will the partner gain from it? Will the area of research develop? Also, are the pieces in place, or is there a pathway to get the pieces in place? For example, is there a funding program that we can apply to, or is there something that we need to explore? So, for example, in the early days of the work that I used to do both at the British High Commission and University of Edinburgh, we didn't have the choice of programs that I showed you in some of the slides. So the way people would try to go about it is apply to their own funding agencies in their own country and then try to work together, which is a hugely challenging and cumbersome situation, because sometimes they don't match in terms of time, in terms of scale of funding. So what is excellent at the moment is that our countries, our funding agencies have really woken up to the benefits of internationalization and have put in place the structures to do so. So for University of Edinburgh, for example, it would look for how its students, how its staff might gain. There are key priorities in terms of global challenges. University of Edinburgh aligns with the Sustainable Development Goals, climate, solving problems of energy, pollution, industrial production, transport. These are very important areas for the University of Edinburgh, as it is for most leading research universities. So if there is a significant way to engage and benefit from not only that partner institution but that place, are we solving a major problem for India? Is a big major challenge for the world also.
Thank you.
So they only partner with research, not with teaching. Is there any provision for teaching partnership? Suppose some teachers have good experience, and then so in this way, is any scheme or provision available for teaching partnership, not research?
Teaching partnerships are more limited for a research-led university, because by the very definition of a research-led university, every faculty must have a research research program and balance their teaching careers. So when it comes to internationalization of teaching, that is a little more of a challenge for Edinburgh or maybe any other research-led university. However, there are colleagues who are interested in this, though it is a little more limited in terms of interest than a research partnership.
Okay. Thank you.
Hello, ma'am.
Yes. Hi, Nafisa.
Yes, hi, ma'am. So, ma'am, it is just a random question, not related to this internationalization. I want to ask that can you give a brief about your background and about your career? And you said that you are working at BHC, British High Commission. So, how is it like related to this thing? And so we could join the dots. And like I'm master student, so I want to know about this thing, that what are like I want to just connect the dots, that what are like future aspects for us.
Sure. Happy to answer that. And I see a very interesting question has popped into the chat box from Dr. Dalai. I will come to that as soon as I've answered Nafisa's question. Thank you for asking that question, Nafisa. I did not imagine sort of this position for myself or a career in internationalization of higher education when I started out, because it does not exist. It did not exist then. As in the introduction, I did a master's in biochemistry. And I had started doing some research, but didn't continue in that pathway. And I joined the British High Commission when they advertised for a science and technology advisor. At that point, they were setting up a science and what is now called a science and innovation network, which uses the tools of diplomacy and in science and technology to facilitate closer relationship between the UK and India. This was quite new in the international relations area at that time in about 2002-3. And when I joined, it was an open field for myself. So basically, it was about understanding what are the priorities between UK and India, how they match, and how to bring them together. And from there on, my sort of pathway evolved into setting up University of Edinburgh's office, which was focused in almost entirely on developing research collaborations and mobility between staff and students. So besides the fashion check, there are a large variety of mobility programs that we have arranged and delivered. And this whole model of, the GBU University of Edinburgh model is again it is a new sort of pathway. There is no existing precedent for it anywhere in the world. In India, certainly not. So that has been my journey. But however, I just want to highlight that there are many articles, institutions, groups that are now focusing on the study of internationalization and training of internationalization in higher education. And you may wish to look at some of these. So there is the Center for Internationalization of Higher Education at Boston College. And their faculty write a number of articles in regular newsletters, news, etc., besides, of course, scholarly publications, which you should find very useful if you're interested in the area. And also NEPA, the colleague Eldo Matthews, whose work I showed up here earlier, the National Institute of Education Planning and Administration in Delhi. For India, they are a great resource in this area, and you will also Google and find many other resources. I hope that helps.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
I'll answer Dr. Dalai's question before going up to the hand from Aditi Banerjee. So Dr. Dalai asked, how is the mechanism for admitting students in GBU to ensure diversity? That is an excellent question, but GBU is very much work in progress, though diversity is certainly an ambition for GBU and as it is for Edinburgh. Aditi, would you like to ask your question, please?
Thank you, Amrita, for this wonderful presentation. It was very insightful. I just wanted to understand from you that you have presented a broader palette for internationalization. In your experience, understanding, are there any short-term, near-term opportunities in internationalization vis-a-vis long-term, or it's just varied?
There are definitely short-term opportunities. So the easy way to go about it, if you're looking at faculty or staff, if you're looking at students, there are some of the opportunities I've highlighted on the slides that went earlier, is simply applying to them and navigating these opportunities. I think that the more people are interested in terms of a bottom-up approach, and there is a growing level of interest in engaging with international opportunities, that encourages hopefully an institution to see that there is traction and this is something around which we need to build a support system and therefore an international office. So through my these number of years in various organizations that have interfaced with internationalization, we have seen a huge amount of interest from faculty, staff, even from the institution. But the inability to develop that support ecosystem has really held, some of these opportunities back. In fact, I gave a talk some time ago on how to set up an international office, what are the dimensions. But what is interesting is that international offices, which have very different names at universities all over the world, will also have very different functions, and how they interface with the rest of their institutions is also very different. So for example, some universities separate strategic partnerships, student recruitment, separate alumni work, which is very focused on international. Some institutions bring them together. Some institutions have themselves as a silo and as a separate service to their academic units. So it's all quite different, but I think the advantage that our Indian institutions have is they can look at this field of what is happening elsewhere, learn from it, and perhaps shortcut the approach to internationalization at their institutions.
Thank you so much.
Is there any questions? I think there are no any question. Thank you, ma'am. We are pleased to have you as a speaker. Thank you all for joining this session. Thank you and nice day.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.